All right, everyone. Welcome back to another Esoterica live stream. Always like doing these. Try to make content every, for 3 weeks or so at a time. Generally speaking, until I basically run out of gas, and then it's really fun to be able to connect with you guys on these live streams and be able to take some questions and stuff like that. Because as you can imagine, I can't get to everything in the comments of episodes, and so this is a great opportunity to be able to reach out to folks in a more personal way and get some questions. But yeah, welcome everybody. Welcome everybody in the chat and everybody watching. A couple hour and a half today to hang out and um, yeah, talk and ask some questions. But yeah, it's been a good run here on the channel recently. We've put out some, I think, some pretty interesting content. Um, one of the texts that I've really enjoyed getting to was the books of you, this Gnostic text, along with the Pistis Sophia, which, in my opinion, are really incredible texts, but they don't really get the kind of airtime that other texts, like the Gospel of Thomas or the Apocryphon of John, or some of the other ones from Nag Hammadi, they just don't get the kind of, I don't know, the airtime that I think they deserve. So, and they are really interesting, especially for folks out there who are interested in the Greek magical papyri, because they're the only actually extant texts from late antiquity of this kind of ascent literature, with the exception of the Merkava text, which I want to say something about those in just a moment. But yeah, I hope folks found the episode on the book of you interesting. And it was really great to be able to talk um, to, to Erin about the text. She's one of the best scholars that she's really one of the only scholars working on the text or worked on the text. So yeah, it was good to work with her on that. Of course, we also got to cover some stuff about Lilith. Lilith is just, for whatever reason, just perennially interesting to people. I suppose she is rather interesting, and so the second in the episodes on Lilith, I think that there'll be a third one. I'm pretty sure there will be. I don't know that if I can do a very good job on the third one, just because I don't focus on contemporary stuff and Lilith in contemporary since basically the 19th century. That has, it's a huge world unto itself. So may work with Dr. Angela Puka from Angela Symposium on getting that episode together. She's a bit more savvy when it comes to contemporary stuff, as folks I'm sure have seen. Again, make sure to subscribe to Angela's Symposium. It's a great channel, a great similar type content to Esoterica. Um, and what else do we work on recently? The Hugramantea, this really early book of Solomonic magic, which was, again, a lot of fun to work on. Sometimes I can find the magic stuff can be a little, I don't know. So the grimoire stuff can be a little trying, just because it's so very repetitive in some ways. But it really is interesting to go back to this really primitive text with the Hugramantea and Solomonic magic, and really see how one of the things that's really interesting to me about the development of Solomonic magic is how we have this core text of the Hugramantea, which is basically a talismanic form of magic. And it's interesting that around that text you get all these accretions, and those magical accretions that build up over time, and over time get systematized into a system of magic. So what's really fascinating is that you get some text for putting up a knife, a sort of infused knife, or certain ritual regalia, or certain other kinds of ritual objects you would wear, headbands or magic circles. And it's interesting that all of that stuff gets eventually sort of accreted onto this Hagramantea text, but eventually it becomes systematized in the Clavicula Solomonis tradition. Systematized is a strong word, but certainly becomes a school of magic. As distinct, for instance, from Picatrix or other texts. And it is amazing how that happened throughout the course of probably beginning in the 6th century or so, with the Hugramantea, and then developing on all the way into the Middle Ages, really till now. I mean, there's plenty of people out there happily doing Solomonic magic. So in that way, it's a really fascinating look into the very archaic history of how this text developed. It'd be really cool to put together a reader of Solomon as a kind of esoteric figure. Um, there's a great book about Solomon as an esoteric figure. It's published by Brill, so it's crazy expensive. But it'd be cool to put together a reader of just Solomonic magic, and it'd be cool to put that together. But I don't know who's going to do that. Um, but yeah, any other stuff? I guess we also covered the Stoics a few weeks ago, about a month ago. I don't know if I've done a live stream since then, but we also covered the Stoics and their connection to esotericism. This is an interesting aspect, I think, of the history of esotericism. Is that we typically, like I say in the video, we lump it in typically with Neoplatonism, and that's not wrong, especially in the history of mysticism. But I would argue that Stoicism has played just as much of an important role in the development of Western esotericism as Neoplatonism. In fact, maybe more in some ways, and and not just Stoicism, but Middle Platonism in general, of which Middle Stoicism is a really important part of that. But I mean, I think people really downplay the role of Middle Platonism in all of this. Um, Numenius and people like that, Philo. There's just absolutely no Western esotericism without all that stuff built into it. And so it's interesting that it's what John Dillon calls the Platonic underground or something like that. Um, so it's interesting that that this stuff just goes, I think, significantly understudied, and the role Stoicism, for instance, plays in all of this is especially understudied. I mean, it would make a great dissertation if someone really wanted to really do a lot of heavy lifting. I think that Stoicism, Western esotericism would make a banger of a dissertation. Great monograph. Uh, yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, it's the kind of thing I would like to write, maybe, but I'm not sure if I have any time to do it. But but yeah, Stoicism again is really interesting. I like Stoicism a lot. I've deeply identified with a lot of the ideas over the years, and I'm sure certainly Epictetus and stuff has got me out of a lot of dark spots. So I'm deeply sympathetic to Stoicism, and um, yeah, it's a pity that kind of got this. Kind of this poor representation that it has these days because of dude bro Stoicism. Um, but yeah, the stuff about myth is just fascinating. The way the Stoics deal with that, and that the unpacking of Greek myths through the Stoic lens of their sort of occult or esoteric hermeneutics. Um, it's just fascinating. I mean, when Philo when Philo really develops it, it becomes what's the right word? If you've ever read Philo's commentaries on Genesis, philosophical commentaries on Genesis, they're just a slog. They're just a slog, and that doesn't make them any less important. But they're really, really difficult and torturous to read. But again, there's just no esoteric hermeneutics like that without without the Stoics. So, I mean, that's kind of what we've covered up until the last several weeks of the channel. A lot of cool new stuff coming. Gonna do an episode, I think, next week on Thoth. Just sort of like who was Thoth, or who is Thoth, I suppose. So really getting back into some of the Egyptian material and really doing an entire episode on him, and a little bit in how he's um, brought into the tradition via Hermes Trismegistus, which is really interesting. That Thoth sometimes, but Hermes is associated with Thoth. Of course, we get Hermes Trismegistus, but he's also associated with Anubis in some cases, which in the sense of being a psychopomp. And so it's interesting how there's how much play there is in these gods, but yeah, the Thoth episode will be really great. It's interesting to note that the major study on Thoth is by Patrick Boylan, I think, and it's over 100 years old. And I don't think there's been a better one since. So this is an interesting case that we'll talk about in the episode. That sometimes old scholarship just gets outdated, and sometimes it's just really good scholarship. And it is really interesting that one of the primary texts on Thoth is about 100 years old, and still quite a good text. He just quotes hieroglyphics. It's fantastic. So I'm going to do that. Also, a really fun thing that we're doing on May the 11th. So keep your calendars open. Is that for folks who know the movie A Dark Song? It's probably one of the most interesting depictions of ceremonial magic in recent film. So we're actually, what we're going to do is we're going to have a live viewing of A Dark Song, but it's going to be myself and Aaron Leach, who's a famed scholar and practitioner of Enochian magic and Solomonic magic, and also Marco Visconti, a practitioner of Thelema, and also expert on the occult. It's going to be really cool because it's going to be me and Marco Visconti and Aaron Leach all watching and commenting on A Dark Song live. So it's, if you like Mystery Science Theater 3000, or if you saw my live stream commentary on The Witch, Robert Eggers movie with Atan Shea, Andy from Atan Shea, I think you'll really like this. It's like two occultists and an academic walk into a cult movie. And what's really going to be great is that Aaron and Marco deeply disagree about the movie, so it'll be really great to see how they disagree about it, and they disagree about it. I think pretty deeply along the lines of ritual practice. It'll be interesting getting a two practitioners' insights into how they think this movie is done well or poorly. Aaron dislikes it deeply, I think, and I think Marco likes it a lot. So it's so it'll be a neat thing. And of course, I'm just an academic, so I can comment on it from an academic point of view, but it'll be a really great, I think a lot of fun too. So yeah, that's on May the 11th. So keep that in your calendars. I think we'll start live streaming at like 4. We'll start the movie at like 4:15 because, you know, Marco's on UK time and I don't want to keep him up all night. But yeah, so that I think it'll be a fun project. What other stuff do we have going on? A couple things in the hopper. So lots going on. Channels going. Hey, Marco, I was just talking about you and Aaron and I doing the A Dark Song live stream. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to that. And I saw Angela in the channel too. Angela, I hope you're feeling better. Angela's been a little under the weather and or quite ill actually. So Rafua Shlema, may you have a complete healing quickly and soon, Angela. Yeah, just hope you're taking it easy and taking a break. But yeah, so that'll be, I don't know, that'll be a fun episode. I'm looking forward to that a lot. I haven't seen A Dark Song in a while since I did the review of it myself back in the day. So it'll be a fun movie to take a look at with people. And also, who doesn't like watching movies together with your friends? It's just a fun thing to do. All right. Well, let me get some questions. But yeah, it'll just it'll be live streamed here. We can't live stream the movie obviously because that would be copyright violation, but we will be watching it live and then commenting on it live. So you can think of us as kind of a commentary track on the movie if you want to watch it along with us. All right, let me get some questions. Peter Hook's in the chat? No, there's no way that's the Joy Division guy. That would be great, but I doubt that very seriously. I always wonder if like famous people watch YouTube. I mean, I think there was a moment I watched I think a thing where I think Anne Hathaway kind of admitted that she was watching Jackson Crawford in on like a talk show or something. So it's weird to think that there might be like, I don't know, Taylor Swift watching Esoterica. That's highly unlikely, but possible. Hey Taylor, if you're watching, hope you're doing well. All right. Let me scroll up and start grabbing some questions. Yeah, be sure, folks, to leave your question in the chat. If you can sort of put a big word question in front of it, that'll help me to see them. And obviously, if you want to support the channel with super thanks or super stickers or whatever, that also will help me see that, and I'll certainly get to those as well. But yeah, let me get to some questions in the chat. Speaking of supers, yeah, Fractured Sigmund. Yeah, let me grab this one real fast. Yeah, thank you. Can you talk about divine androgyny in the alchemical and esoteric tradition? Read a bit about it in Manly P. Hall book. I'd like to know more. Um, so the idea of the androgyne is a pretty classic image going back, well back into both Kabbalah. The first human beings are androgyne in that tradition. They're separated later, but they're androgyne. You see androgyny in lots of traditions, in esoteric traditions. And I think that what's going on, at least in also in the alchemical tradition, you see that imagery as well. And the idea basically is that there must be, and according to the alchemists, there are these principles, like masculine and feminine principles. Now we can say what we like about essentializing things like gender, but certainly medieval people did, ancient people did, and and the idea is that with these two principles, they represent a wide range of ideas. Heat and cold. You think about the classic stuff you get in Aristotle. And so basically, they're polarities, and the part of what one has to do in alchemy is learn to combine and balance these polarities. And once they're set into balance, typically the androgyne is depicted as being cleaved in half, so separated, and then recombined often through sexual union and a lot of alchemical representations. So basically, what you're doing is you're dealing with metaphysical polarities or physical polarities in the case of alchemy, and in that case, your task is to manage the polarities. So in many ways, that's kind of what's going on, at least in alchemy. And there's an idea that if the divine is fundamentally one, if reality is fundamentally one, which is pretty a pretty deep conception of to be found in lots of esoteric schools. If the world is fundamentally one, then the difference between men and women is somehow illusory because they're just one, and that the androgyne represents that primordial unity of the human being. So that's also another way that it functions in the imagery you get and things like alchemy. So that is a big. I think that's at least some of the ways that it's functioning there. Um, but yeah, I mean, again, it's interesting that like I said, in Kabbalah, Adam and Eve are actually fused together back to back. You get the same image in Plato, and so that's the kind of thing you get in those texts, and this imagery becomes part and parcel of what you get in the Western esoteric tradition. So hope that helps. Um, thank you for the super question. Um, let's see. All right. Scroll back up. Do Canaanite gods worship really end, specifically Baal worship? Yeah, I mean Baal worship probably came to an end in the late classical period. Um, there's not much evidence of Baal worship after the Judeans returned to Judah. It seems like indigenous Baal worship in that region was largely going away. But some form of Baal was still worshipped among the Phoenicians, and so we see in Melkart, which is a Baal-like character, Baal-like god. So yeah, you do get some of that, but I think by the late classical period, Baal worship in North Africa and in what is now Lebanon, Syria, I think it basically had gone away. It had been replaced, I think, largely by Christianity and certainly by the Islamic period. There's no longer any Baal worship. So yeah, no, I think that went extinct. I think would say by the time of the Islamic conquests, it had certainly gone extinct by then. Um, Although it is an interesting question, when exactly did it go extinct in in Judah, Samaria? It'd be interesting. I've asked that, and I've never gotten a great answer as to when exactly it went extinct. It's hard to say when something ends because there's no one out there recording. Well, now we no longer believe in this, so it's sort of a difficult question in that way. Grind or death? You look so metal. Black, I guess. I don't like grind metal so much, and I don't like death metal, like the Cookie Monster lyrics. Um, It's technically interesting, but no, I'm a black metal guy. Although today I'm sporting my Wardruna shirt, which I think is derivative of black metal in some way. Most of those guys in Wardruna are, it's back when the day with Gaul was in there. They're sort of downstream of black metal, and so you certainly get black metal vibes from Wardruna a little bit. But yeah, so nothing that's folk metal, I suppose. But yeah, but yep, black metal, definitely black metal. And that's why all the merch is like black metal themed, because I don't know, I like that. I like the aesthetic. Thank you, Zul Allah, for the super sticker. I appreciate it. I appreciate that. Thank you for supporting the channel. Favorite D&D setting? Of course, we get the obligatory D&D question. I am Planescape man. I like Planescape. I think Dark Sun is a cool setting too. I've heard that Dark Sun's getting a 5th edition reboot, but I love Planescape. I love the factions, and I love the city, and I love that world. I love the aesthetic of that. De Terraletzi, the artist. I just love the way he's scary that he sort of did all the art for it in some ways, and so that setting is my favorite. The Lady of Pain's so creepy and cool. I actually have the original Planescape setting in a lot of the books and stuff from the 90s. So yeah, that would be mine. Planescape. All right. All right. Would you ever consider doing a video topic on Eastern Orthodox mystical presence like hesychasm? Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know a lot about Eastern Orthodoxy and hesychasm in general, so I don't know a ton about it. I'm just not an expert on Eastern stuff. That's a good opportunity to get better at it. I think I'm fairly confident that Philip from Let's Talk Religions covered it. I think covered it quite well. I remember watching his episode, although I don't remember the details of it now. But I think he covered it as well. Certainly, there's esoteric aspects to it, but yeah, I mean, this is a place where just my knowledge is just like not so great about it, and so being able to do an episode about it is just kind of hamstrung by my lack of knowledge. But it's certainly worthy of an episode, and I'd love to cover it. So yeah, it's super fascinating. Hesychasm is really fascinating, especially compared to things like yoga and stuff like that. So yeah, a great topic. I would love to get to it. It's just a thing that it's just my own ignorance. I can't cover it because I don't know a ton about it, but that's a good reason to learn more about it. All right. Hey, Erica. I once went to a church and a so-called prophet called me out and said I have the spirit of Lilith and I need to be brought to an altar for it to be cast out. Um, that is interesting. Did they cast it out of you? I mean, Lilith doesn't really attack. I mean, assuming that you're a woman from the thing, Lilith doesn't really attack women, at least in the literature. She attacks men and babies, and small children. So it'd be weird, for her to attack you. I mean, I'm not. Who am I though to say what Lilith can and can't do? I'm just saying it's a very strange. It'd be a very strange thing. So, but I'm sorry that someone accused you of having the spirit of Lilith. Or if you did have it, I'm sorry that as well. Lilith is terrifying. I do. I mean, obviously, I know that Lilith is sort of a revered character in modern feminism and things like that. But I don't know. I find her utterly horrifying. There's everything I read about Lilith, everything I've ever read about her, I just find her deeply terrifying. And I don't know. It's sort of like I see sometimes on Reddit people are like, how do I get Lilith to come and blah blah blah. I'm like, why would you do that? It just seems like a bad idea. So really bad idea. But yeah, I'm not for me. Well, I hope that they fix your Lilith problem. Any sources for learning Sumerian? Yes. If you actually, I mean, it's funny that I think about this, but I think the people over at Digital Hammurabi, which is an excellent channel, I think they're offering an introductory Sumerian course. I just saw it a minute ago. Let me see if I can find it real fast for you. I think they're offering I mean, they on their channel they have like lots of they have lots of episodes on learning to read Sumerian, and they have a great book about learning to read Sumerian. It's a great introductory book, but they're having a class. I think they're doing a class pretty soon on reading Sumerian. So I don't see it now, but if you take a look at their channel, the Digital Hammurabi channel, and look around there, you can find some stuff for learning Sumerian. It's not a terribly difficult language to learn in a lot of ways. I mean, reading the cuneiform is not easy. You have to memorize a lot. But if you just want to learn it as a language and you're reading everything transliterated, it's not a terribly difficult language, all things told. It has like a kind of glamour because of its association with being the first, the first written language we know of, or at least the first we can read. But it's actually not a terribly difficult language in the end. But neat. You get to read some cool literature like the instructions of Shurupak and stuff. So that's kind of cool. Or the Keshem, which is super neat text. All right. Sheena Torres, thank you. Just finished your Yahweh video for the 5th time. Wow. You've seen it more times than I have. Is Elohim, before the Yahweh merge, supposed to be El or some other Canaanite deity? There's a lot of debate about why the plural is used there. I think there are probably several reasons why Elohim is plural. One, it may have just been a reference to the assembly of the gods. You get a lot of Elohim, especially the Elohim story at the very beginning of Genesis, where the Elohim are creating the world. And it's probably at that point early on a sort of catch-all for the divine assembly, which is a very early idea. But you still see it in the Hebrew Bible, like in Psalm 82. So I think that at some point early on, it just actually literally meant gods. Literally, it meant what it is in Hebrew. It's a plural. And eventually, as Israelite religion becomes monolatrous, the idea, the word is kept because they're going to keep the word, but what's under the hood changes, and you're going to get increasingly a monotheistic belief with the Yahweh El merger, and eventually the demoting of all these creatures in the divine assembly. And what ends up happening is that the term sticks. But what's under the hood changes. So at any rate, that is what I think is going on with the remnants of that the remnants of Elohim as a plural noun, but operating as a singular in the text. So that's what I think is happening. An episode of video on Asherah. Yeah, I could do an episode on Asherah. We don't know a lot about her, actually, in a lot of ways. I mean, she's certainly mysterious. This whole business of Asherah and her this sort of totem object, this tree that is associated with her. In fact, the overwhelming majority of the times that the Asherah is mentioned in the Hebrew Bible, it's referring to the cult object, not to the goddess. Of course, the cult object represents the goddess, but we don't know a ton about the goddess and how she functions. She's certainly a consort of Yahweh, at least to some Israelites. Some Israelites did not like that idea, clearly, but she was consort to Yahweh. And but yeah, we could do an episode about her and her cult object. I'd love to do an episode about Anat. Anat is just like the coolest Canaanite deity. She's just so brutally metal. I love the images of just her massacring people and hands flying around and stuff like that. It's great. So Anat is also and she also gets some representation. Her and Resheph, which is a plague sickness deity, also gets some play in Egypt as well. So there's some great depictions of Anat in Egypt as well. So, all right. I have a couple of these other super chats and stickers. Thank you, Darren. Down in Australia, appreciate the super sticker. All right, Benjamin Love. I'm working through the Zohar from the beginning. Wow. Zohar 1 is just brutal. If you're working, the introduction to the Zohar itself is just a difficult text of all the things to put it there. It is really, really bad. They're really hard. So you're working through the Zohar from the beginning. I watched all 9 of the Anuka series. I'm now at 19,149. that's in Parshat Chai Sarah, but I can't find the Anuka. So I'm guessing if you're reading it, depending on the edition you're reading, it can be in one of two places. It's either in Parshat Balak, um, so it's in Parshat Balak. In some older editions, it's in Devarim. And the reason why it's in Devarim is because, as you probably know, the Zohar Altara doesn't have much of Devarim, just a little bit of the very beginning, and they stick the Yanuka there. So typically in most editions, including the Margaliot, which is there on my shelf, it'll be right at the very beginning of Parshat Balak. I forget exactly where exactly it is, but if you look in the description of the Yanuka series, we have the sugya marked out there. But good luck with learning Zohar. That is a hard text. The beginning of it is especially hard. But good luck. Much hatzlacha for your study of Zohar. So, but the Yanuka should be in Parsha Balak. All right. The Succubus Scholar. Do you think you'll ever do a video comparing Lilith and Machalat? I always found the text disgusting. Yeah, this is a great question. I think I said this in the episode that there are three demonesses that really haunt the Zohar and the Talmud that are really the big demonesses in Jewish demonology. That's Lilith, of course, Machalat bat Agrat, and Naamah. And Machalat bat Agrat, or Agrat bat Machalat. These are really mysterious because we know that, for instance, we know her mother, but we don't know much about them at all. There's a great story with them in Chanina Bendosa, where Machalat bat Agrat is confined, I think, to Tuesday nights or Wednesday nights, roaming around with her horde of demons. So yeah, I would like to come back and do an episode on Naamah, who's an interesting character who kind of gets as a biblical character. I think the wife of Tuval Cain, and she's eventually turned into a demon in the literature, which is weird because her name means like charming, and I think that's meant to be like charming in a creepy way. But yeah, I'd like to also do one on Machalat bat Agrat and Naamah. So yeah, I'll get back to them eventually as well when I come back, circle back to more demonology stuff. It's a pity they don't get more attention. Lilith steals the show, which is unsurprising considering she's such a boss character. But she's not the queen of the demons. Lilith is not the queen of the demons. It's Makalat bat Agrat. She's the queen of the demons. All right. Any recent analysis or translations of the Book of Soiga? Also, do you know if there's a digital scan that includes the tables? So I think Jim Reed has the definitive analysis of the Book of Soiga. I mean, he found the algorithm by which it was produced, which is a relatively simple algorithm, by the way. This is a thing that I think John Dee gets overly praised for him being a mathematician. Yeah, he was a good mathematician. There's no doubt about that. And certainly he was better than anyone in his day in a lot of ways, but he wasn't that great. For instance, his crypto, this is a part of a lot of the conspiracy theories about Dee and Francis Bacon and Bill Shakespeare stuff. They really make out John Dee to be this extraordinarily good crypto analyst. He couldn't even figure out the tables of Soiga, and the tables of Soiga are an incredibly simple algorithm. They're very simple algorithm. And so Jim Reed's has, I think, the best analysis, the definitive analysis of how the tables of Soiga were generated. And I think if you email me, I think I have a copy of the scan of them. I think I do. I have to look back through my digital archives and see if I have one. But yeah, shoot me an email and I'll try to dig it up. But at the end of the day, Dee really thought that it was the most important book. It was given to Adam in Paradise. I think, in fact, at the very beginning of the Enochian sessions, he actually even asks the angel Uriel about the Book of Soiga, and the Book of Soiga confirms that it was given to Adam in Paradise. But it's just, it's a simple algorithm that basically generates, use a seed word, and then it just sort of repeats in a certain kind of way. So that's it. And that's what it is. And I think I do. I think I have a whole episode, I think, about the Book of Soiga, if you want to check that out, if you haven't seen it already. But I go into detail about how it was generated. But yeah, it's that's it. That's how it was done. Um, yeah, watching any of the YouTube videos relating to Dr. John Dee and the Shakespeare conspiracy stuff. Yeah, that stuff's rubbish. It's just like pareidolia gone nuts. Yeah, the Francis Bacon, William Shakespeare, Fosfolio, John Dee stuff. It's just, I think, what's the right word? Reckless speculation, knit together with a bunch of coincidences. Yeah, it's if you look hard enough at any data set, you'll find patterns or you'll make them. And I think that's a great example of pareidolia gone crazy. But no, I don't think none of that stuff is convincing to me at all. It's good stuff for the History Channel. It's bad stuff for actual, like, trying to understand these historical figures. But yeah, no, zero interest in that stuff. And I get sent I get I get sent links to them, and I'm like, oh, this is so more of that stuff. All right. I don't suppose you'd ever contemplate covering the actual contents of the Hermetica. Your current videos map out the text, but don't really discuss the ideas. They do. I think they discuss the ideas to some degree. Um, I mean, it's gonna get me like her esoteric canceled. The ideas of the Hermetica are just not that interesting. I mean, they're just, if you, and again, I say that they're not that interesting if you put them into the scope of Middle Platonism. Um, they're not that interesting because they're not philosophically rigorous. The Corpus Hermeticum and the Hermetic text aren't great philosophy, or they're not interesting philosophy, terribly interesting philosophy compared to Philo or Numenius or someone, because they were never meant to be that. They were basically the inner teachings of a school trying to achieve salvation by basically purifying the soul of a person of all the daimons that influence their soul, the stellar daimons. Um, that was the point. And so they're not texts that are interesting to me philosophically. I think that uh, they're pretty poorly thought out philosophy in a lot of ways, and pretty inconsistent to boot. Um, half the Hermetica can't make its mind up if it's dualistic or monistic, in fact. But at the end of the day, they're texts about soteriology. They're texts about salvation. They're not texts about philosophy. And Walter Hanegraaff makes a pretty big deal of this, where he doesn't like the term Hermetic philosophy. He prefers the term Hermetic spirituality. Um, I don't know that I follow him on that, just because I think that the way that we think of philosophy now is kind of applied logic chopping, is just not the way philosophy was thought of in antiquity. Antiquity philosophy was really thought of as a much more total life thing. It was a way of being. And so, if philosophia is thought of in the way that it was thought in the ancient Greek world, especially at the time of the Corpus Hermeticum, then philosophy is the better word, because they really didn't talk about spirituality. There's no word like that in the ancient world. No one talked about something being numisticy or something like that. Um, but I take his point. His point is that by focusing on the philosophical aspects of them, we really do, um, we miss what they thought was important, and what they thought was important was salvation. Um, it's just that as a philosophical text, they're not that interesting at the end of the day, because they're not really meant to be philosophical in that sense. So, but yeah, I mean, it's basically all you could say. I mean, you get into the weeds of some things, like the degree to which the texts represent a dualistic worldview or not. There's some interesting things there, but yeah, that's kind of it. But so yeah, but I'll circle back. I need to cover Hanegraaff's recent book. It's a really, really good. I need to cover it at some point, so maybe I'll come back and discuss Hanegraaff's thesis in an episode, and that will give me the chance to do that. So yeah, that would be a good thing. That'd be a great hook to do it, is to really bring in some of Hanegraaff's ideas. We are very blessed to have that dude. We are very blessed to have that dude. Is it possible to discuss the Hyksos, the tribe that infiltrated the throne in Egypt? I mean, infiltrated, they just militarily overthrew the Egyptians. So what happens when you rest on your laurels and beef up your military, you get overthrown by the Hyksos. Um, and it's said to be the characters created as prophets in the Bible. I don't know that there's any much of a connection between the Hyksos and the Hebrews. I think that those are distinct people. The Iparu, or whatever they were, the sort of quasi nomadic bandit people. I don't think that there's a connection between the Hyksos and the Israelites. I think they're different peoples, and this happens several times in the Egyptian, situation. Right, the 25th dynasty, I think it was Nubian. It was over. Nubians overthrew it, and Hyksos overthrew it at some point, and so and of course the Ptolemies and the Greeks overthrew it as well, and the Romans. So it's important to think about the discontinuity in Egyptian history as much as the continuity. But I don't think I'll do anything on the Hyksos. There are lots of other history channels that have covered the Hyksos and done really, really well, or the Sea Peoples for that matter, who become, at least some of them become the Peliset, become the Philistines of the Hebrew Bible. The Sea Peoples are interesting. It's also interesting about their religion and what they believed. The Sea Peoples, they brought their probably Minoan or Aegean religion. It's interesting that they quickly assimilated to the religions of the ancient Near East, the adoption of Dagon and other kinds of gods. One wonders to what degree, how quickly their religions changed, and how quickly they also were assimilated into Egyptian culture. Some interesting stuff. Of course, we have the modern hermeticist Dan Atrell in the chat. Hi, Dan. How you doing? How do I summon a succubus? I don't know, man. That sounds like a terrible idea. Go sleep in an abandoned house. That's how you get Lilith to bother you. That's what the Talmud says. Just go sleep in an abandoned house and she'll come and get you. So good luck with that, Dan. Hope that Lilith stuff works out well for you. Folks, go subscribe to the Modern Hermeticist, who has a great episode out. Just listening to it earlier, man, on the Hermetic astrology. That stuff is really, really interesting. Another text I'd love to cover, I'm going to cover soon, is the Quirinides. It's another one of these Hermetic texts that doesn't really get a lot of coverage. I don't think there's even a modern edition of it. But in terms of the technical Hermetica stuff, the Quirinides is a text I want to cover pretty soon. I think there is a translation from like 1665 into English. So that's a cool text. I want to work on that as well at some point. All the technical Hermetica stuff is really interesting. Will you cover Asian esoteric traditions? Probably not, just because I don't know anything about them. I don't know anything about Shingon, esoteric Buddhism, or Tantra, or Tibetan. The channel really focuses on Western esotericism, which I know it's a bit in vogue now to dismiss the idea of the West, which I'm not that interested in doing. I think that it's still a pretty good marker, although I would expand the West much further than Europe. Now, certainly have it include the Arab world and the Persian world, maybe even. But yeah, I just don't know anything about Eastern esotericism, so it's a case that I just can't do episodes about it. Again, Dr. Angela Puka has some background in Eastern philosophy, and so she could cover that stuff. But I don't know when or if she will. But I would ask her. She has more of a knowledge base to cover that material than I do. What do you think of the theory that the psychological principle of cognitive dissonance can explain prophetic and apocalyptic traditions? Yeah, I think if what you're asking is did the how to say this right? Did the failure of Deuteronomistic theology ultimately lead to the apocalyptic tradition? I think the answer to that has to be yes at some level. That once you sort of get a basic historical problem, a theological problem, is that you have this Deuteronomistic theology that develops sometime maybe in the reign of Josiah, maybe a little before. And the argument there is, look, if you have a deal with this God Yahweh, if you keep your part of the bargain by worshiping this God Yahweh correctly, then you'll get all this stuff. You'll get land and children and things like this. And Yahweh will protect you as basically your national God. I mean, this text, functions basically as a vassal contract. And it didn't work. The Israelites got destroyed, and they didn't just get destroyed; they got destroyed and exiled. And so you have this Judean elite, many of which were priests, and bring you into again the priests and people like Ezekiel are really the elites of the society. They're sitting in Babylon, and they're like, well, we have a theological problem. We're not in our homeland anymore. Our temple's destroyed. But what they threatened us with never happened, that we'd be entirely wiped out. And so the Judeans were faced with a theological dilemma. They had to develop a new theology. And I think the new theology they developed was apocalyptic monotheism. Apocalyptic monotheism is what comes out of that. And I think I've said this before, that Israelite religion went into exile in Babylon, and Judaism came out. And so I think that I wouldn't so much call it cognitive dissonance as I would call it theological dissonance. That you had a theological story that you told yourself, and it didn't happen. And what do? You make a new theology. You shift the theology, and that shift in theology, I think, led to the rise of apocalyptic Judaism, and that worked, and it was very successful. I mean, apocalyptic Judaism produced a mountain of literature. If you compare the amount of the 2-volume pseudepigrapha of the apocalyptic texts, including Dead Sea Scrolls and others, it is much more than Hebrew Bible. Much more than Hebrew Bible in terms of just volume of literature. And so the apocalyptic solution to the failure of Deuteronomistic theology, which is still out there limping around, um, um, it's just stunning, positively stunning. And of course, Christianity emerges out of that matrix, and so does Islam. So I wouldn't think of it as cognitive dissonance so much as I would think of it as theological dissonance. And again, the real theological geniuses over there in Babylon who basically solved the dilemma by developing a new theology. It is incredibly impressive to me. Um, Real geniuses, people like Ezekiel and the cadre of priest, scribe scholars that did that stuff. Real geniuses. So that doesn't make them right, but it is to me quite ingenious. Quite ingenious. Why is that? To my knowledge, that Sumerian religions influence what became Europe to the west, but then go the other way to India in the east. I don't think the Sumerian religions really influenced Europe. I don't think there's much evidence of that. I know everyone wants to make it out that Yahweh and Enki and those gods are somehow related, but I don't think there's any evidence of that. So no, I don't think there's much evidence on the European religions, at least the pagan religions, were influenced heavily by the Indo-European sort of pan myth that existed. And so, I think Sumerian religion had a big impact on Akkadian religion, and to some degree that had an influence. But how religion ultimately developed in Europe, European was, I think, mostly the sort of matrix of Proto-Indo-European mythology, which there's some great books about that stuff. So, but yeah, I think the Sumerians are they're one of these people that because because they're kind of mysterious, everyone lays stuff at the feet of them. But I think they get a lot more play in fringe theories than they should. And I think that they don't get studied enough on their own terms as they should. I mean, we have a lot of Sumerian literature. We can read about them and what they actually thought. I mean, the amount of like bizarre Anunnaki comments that I get on the channel. I'm like, yeah, the Anunnaki were a thing in their religion. They were just guardians of the underworld. That's it. But people think they're aliens and everything else. I've done a video talking about the devil. Probably at least the devil's been around a couple of videos. But I haven't done one specifically on the devil. There's lots of other good content on the devil. Religion for Breakfast has done some great stuff on the origins of Satan or the devil. So I probably won't cover him just because he's kind of normie. Here at Esoterica, we kind of go deep. Covered things like obscure demons like Naamah. The devil's too normie for this channel, so probably won't cover him. He's just not terribly interesting. Or at least not terribly interesting from the point of view of this channel. But no, there's lots of other good content about him on other channels. Do you know Lilith relates to Mithras Zervan with her being described as lion face and snake body? I don't know that Lilith is ever described as having a lion face. She's normally described as having a top half of her body being quite beautiful, and the bottom half of her body being either made of fire, the same fire, by the way, that the rotating sword that guards the Garden of Eden is made of. Um, Sometimes she's very fierce and scary, but I don't know that there's a connection between Mithras and that. And also, she doesn't have a snake body. That's Samael, who, at least in the classic text, is turned to a snake. So I don't think there's any connection there, not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge. It's another place that people love to do. Um, uh, they like to lay a lot of stuff at the feet of Mithras. There's a lot of 19th century myths, basically, that Christianity is basically just sort of a rebaptized version of Mithraism. And they say things like Mithras was born from a virgin. He wasn't. He was born from a stone, or he was born on the December 25th, which he wasn't. There's all kinds of like weird old repetitive lies or misinformation, I would say, that gets told about Mithras. So Mithrasism really gets um, I don't know, overplayed, I think. Especially considering that we don't know anything about actually or we know very little about what was going on with the Mithras cult. Um, let's see here, get some more. Ever cover the construction relevance of the Sphinx? Probably not. Yeah, probably not. Just because I don't think they know much about. I mean, I don't think they know why it was built. And the conspiracy theories that it has water erosion and stuff like that are silly. But although there are chambers in it, which is kind of cool, and it's not as big as you would think. They always shoot it from the Dutch angle, looking up at it, that makes it look really big. But if you actually see it in real life, I mean, it's pretty big, but it's not quite as big as sometimes you think it is. But yeah, I don't think I'll cover the Sphinx just because it's not really tied up to the to Western esotericism so much. But maybe. Never say never. Never say never. Genghis Galahad, thank you, man. I always love your comments. Um, John D. Enochian Spirits was all about worldly geopolitical domination through otherworldly advantage. Would they recommend going to New World concerned over human political affairs? I mean, yes, at some level, there are two things that are true about the Enochian sessions, is that they are overtly political. One of the big things that one can do with the Liber Loga is spy on other nations. You can use the Enochian system of magic. In fact, one of the principal things that one does with the Enochian magic, at least the Enochian stuff described in Dee and Kelly's actual journals, not what people do now, maybe, or maybe they do, I don't know, is that it's absolutely about spying on other nations. It's basically a form of remote viewing, so you can spy on other countries. And there is a overtly apocalyptic tenor in the Enochian sessions, in which the revealing of the contents of the Liber Loga either anticipates or precipitates the apocalypse. There's debate in the text, and there's debate among modern occultists about whether it precipitates or it comes before the apocalypse. But certainly they really thought that the whole thing was definitely wrapped up in sort of apocalyptic ideas. So surely, yeah. And the apocalypse is inherently political. There's all, the Antichrist and all that stuff is very, very political. And so there's no way that to read the Enochian texts, and again, people scry the Aethers now as a kind of, in a more Crowley-esque way, right? They're kind of doing it as part of a journey toward personal discovery, or the Holy Guardian Angel, or what have you. But for Dee and Kelly and for the angels, it was inherently wrapped up with the apocalypse and inherently wrapped up with politics. Which, I don't know, maybe some people find that deflationary, but I think it's terribly interesting. Deborah Harkness in her book covers this apocalyptic element about the Enochian sessions very, very well. So if you've ever got the chance to read her, I think her book's called Conversations with Angels. Her book really covers this topic pretty well. All right. I've heard that the Sea Peoples were the Greek navy of the Trojan War. Is that accepted by scholars now? I don't think that's the case. I think that I mean, when we see depictions of the sea peoples, it's almost always the sea peoples. When in Egypt, when we have depictions of them, because they have this very distinct kind of mohawk hair, they have their families with them. I think they're refugees. I mean, I think that they're refugees. There's some good evidence to believe that there was some volcanism in the Aegean, and that basically sent people running, and they're refugees. I think I think they were basically refugees, and just like now, people don't really like refugees, unfortunately, and I think that they had to basically fight their way to a home in Egypt and into the Canaan, and I think that's what they were. I think they were refugees. So I don't think they were part of um, part of the Trojan army. What is it? What is the Trojan word? The Hittite word for Troy? Walusa? No, I don't think that they were that. Um, all right. I think he's just hiding the real knowledge for his initiates. That's absolutely what's happening. You'd be surprised how often how often this is legitimately levied at me. Um, I think that someone sent me an episode. Someone sent me a video um, criticizing my episode on the Philosopher's Stone, where I just lay out like what the actual texts say about the Philosopher's Stone. Of course, people want it to be something else, and I think at the end of I clicked through it, but at the end of the episode, the person making it just basically argued that esoterica is like a psyop, like a disinformation thing. Where I'm like, yeah, the philosopher's stone and alchemy is really just about physical processes like chemistry, and I'm really like hiding the real alchemy or hiding the real spiritual truth or something. I'm like, nothing can be further from the truth. I have no secret information to hide. Um, but you might, Dan. You're the real secret. You're the real ascended master. So maybe people should ask you this stuff. Um, but yeah, it is interesting how often I get accused of um, I get how often I get accused of hiding the real secrets or something. I don't have any secrets to hide. Um, all right, let me scroll down and grab some more questions. Still trying to wrap my head around the documentary hypothesis and its modern competitors, supplementary and fragmentary. Where do I land? The best arguments. I'll wade into real dangerous waters here. Yeah, I mean, some combination of all of them probably are true, right? It's pretty clear that the documentary hypothesis in some version is true, which is just to say that the Torah as we have it is a quilt. I like the idea of text as the word text really comes from the Latin word I think textus, which means like a sheet of linen. That in that sense it's homogeneous. It's all put together and sort of mechanically put in a linear order. I think of a quilt as sort of patched together over time. And I think that that the Hebrew Bible is a quilt, and where those edges of the individual patches are is we're going to be arguing about that forever. At least someone gets job security out of it. Um, but it's pretty clear that it's a patchwork. Where the borders are, I don't know. Do those borders, do the classic JEPD borders, are they them? Maybe in some sense they must be. But um, I mean, again, you look at the text like Deuteronomy with Deuteronomy 4 through 28 or whatever, or what is it, 4 through 20, whatever the text there. That seems like that was the text that at least the core of what Josiah found in that wall. Um, so yeah, I think that some version of that is probably true. But yeah, I think some version of the documentary and supplementary hypotheses have to be true. But the editors of that, by the way, did a good enough job that it will provide job security for biblical Hebrew Bible scholars for the rest of eternity. So the fact that we can't quite tell where this stuff begins and ends is just a testimony to their skill as editors. So, but yeah, I don't know where I land and all that. I'm not well versed enough to know exactly where I land, just to know that Moses didn't write the damn thing. That's for sure. Um, so that is what I think. Any thoughts on the idea of Jesus as a revolutionary leader taking on a historical role of the Messiah to encourage resistance to Roman rule? Um, yeah, I think that has to be true to some degree. I don't think I don't buy the more leftist version of Jesus where he's sort of like a proto Che Guevara. Um, I don't think that is true. I don't think he was actively trying to be a partisan in the sense of like actually leading a rebellion against the Romans. Um, and I think he wasn't doing that because he wasn't going to be very good at that. I think that he was an apocalyptic preacher, but I think he believed that the world was about to end. And I think that he was anti-Roman in the sense that he taught an apocalyptic theology where the Roman Empire was an apostate government, and the true government was a kingdom of heaven, and that the kingdom of heaven was going to come soon. And he may have thought of himself as instrumental in that process, and in the sense that he preached that the imminent coming of the kingdom of heaven would supplant the Roman Empire, and he clearly, caused a riot, or it seems like he caused a riot, or at least a brief riot in on Passover, where the Romans are already, everything's turned up to 11, and I think that's what got him killed. I think that's ultimately what got him killed. Is that I'm sure the Romans crucified a bunch of people that weekend. Um, so that's my general thinking of that. But I don't think of him as being sort of a revolutionary leader. He clearly kept a lot of what he taught to himself. If we read Mark, which is a pretty early attestation, as much as we can trust Mark in its Pauline influences, I don't think Jesus wanted to get out his message. I think he kept it pretty close to his chest, and I think he did so because it was a dangerous one. So that's my general thinking. But yeah, I think that sometimes leftists like to paint him as kind of like a Judean Che Guevara character. I think that goes too far. I think it makes politics separate from religion in a way that I think is incorrect. And I think that for Jesus and for everyone back then, they were very much wrapped up in one another. Very much wrapped up in one another. Um, It's funny. Someone, Dan, you mentioned the History Channel. Someone from the Oak Island show reached out to me. Like somebody who works on the Oak Island show reached out to me and was wanted my opinion about some rocks that they found, some stones they found with some inscriptions that look like alchemical inscriptions. So, and the Laguna guys live here in Michigan, I think. I don't know what if I want to be on the Oak Island show, but that would be hilarious to make it. It's secret. It's actually secret Enochian stuff. Um, Let's see. Does a snake in Genesis 2:3 reflect an early Israelite belief in snakes, divinities derived from Egypt's Uraeus? Winged snakes appear on Hezekiah's seals. It's a good question. I don't know. I've heard, and I've actually have people wondered this. Other people wonder this as well. I mean, snakes are clearly playing a really interesting role in Israelite literature. Not just the snake in Genesis 2, um, but also the bronze snake that Moses has. And we see lots of, like you said, Egyptian iconography around snakes from the bulle, the little clay seals. Um, I don't know. I do not know. Um, I don't know. I do like images of like snakes with legs that you see sometimes in Egyptian texts. They're very cute. But I don't know. I don't know what the connection there though. Though I will say that this is sort of a pet theory of mine, and I'm sure someone else has come up with it as well because there's nothing new under the sun. Um, that I don't think that the Genesis 2 story is actually meant to be serious. I think it was meant to be funny. I think it's a humorous story. I think the puns and stuff in there tell me the word plays in there tell me it was meant to be funny. God's kind of a bumbling idiot, right? God's like walking around the cool of the day, and it's like they eat from the tree of knowledge, and then God's like, "Oh crap! Like if they eat from the tree of life, they'll be like us. They'll be gods." And they kind of like hastily shoos them out of the back door of the Garden of Eden. I think that whole story is meant to be funny. We read it now, so and again, you have the word plays, right? Like where the snake is Arum, he's clever, and the people are Arumim. They're naked, and so like there are word plays like that through the text. And typically, word plays are a pretty good indicator that someone's trying to be funny, trying to be funny. And I think that the text, if you read it from a point of view of it being silly and humorous, is, I think, far more far more believable than the sort of Miltonian fall that we get in, that we've all inherited from Paradise Lost, this very serious Miltonian fall in the story. So I think that the snake was meant to be have comedic element there. And so we often, I think, take it way too seriously, but I think the text was always meant there's a yeah, I think the text was meant to be humorous more than tragic. Not that you can't have both. Why not both? Um, let's see. What kind of calligraphy do I do? I mostly just do Western European calligraphy. Um, yeah, historical stuff. I love, textura quadrata and insular scripts. I was mucking around with some Luxwheel minuscule, which is just the most garish, tangly script. It's like black metal letters in the Middle Ages. Um, but yeah, I like yeah, Western European medieval calligraphy. I don't do copperplate. And I don't do gold leaf. I don't do any illuminations. In fact, I produce tons and tons and tons of text where the initial letters is left blank. Where someone who can draw can come back later after I'm dead and add all the illumination, because I'm not going to do it. I'm quite bad at it. Sorry, a little off topic. Given the influence the Epic of Gilgamesh supposedly had on the Bible, would you consider covering the subject and influence? Um, Maybe, maybe. I mean, you do get some Lilith stuff in the Epic of Gilgamesh, or the Lili function in that text. Utnapishtim obviously has pretty clear influence on the Noah story. Um, but maybe. I do like the fact that we're still finding parts of it. I think just a few years ago they found a whole new tablet, a whole new section. Um, um, you may know, right, that there's a moment where Gilgamesh and Enkidu are going to make their way to the forest in Lebanon to go fight Humbaba. Who has just the best? Enkidu and Humbaba are just the best names, and in the original, if you've ever read most of the texts, they just sort of they end up in the cedar forest. But the new text actually has them getting into the cedar forest. There's monkeys and stuff and the trees. So they do recover some new text just recently, which is kind of cool. But yeah, maybe I'll cover the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's a fun text. It's a fun text. Will I cover the Brethren of Purity and the Yazidi? Probably not, mostly because Philip has done a really fine job of covering both of them. So if you really want good episodes on the Brethren of Purity and the Yazidi, I would take a look at Philip and Let's Talk Religion and Religion for Breakfast. They both have good episodes on the Yazidi. I would like to cover the Jabirian corpus at some point, and that kind of gets us into the world of Baghdadi Shia Ismaili stuff. So I would like to cover that. I'm gonna have to do a little bit more educating myself on those texts, but I would love to cover them. I think they're important. So yeah, maybe I'll cover the alchemical stuff and sort of the Jabirian corpus, but probably not 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 the Brethren of Purity and the Yazidi, because they've been covered so well already. Thoughts on doing episodes on Catholic mysticism or Orthodox mysticism? I mentioned Orthodox mysticism earlier, that I just don't know a ton about it, so I haven't made episodes about it. But I have done already episodes on Catholic mysticism. I've covered the Bechenes. I would like to do an episode on Meister Eckhart. I'd like to drill down into doing some texts, some stuff on. I know Dan and Trell and I were talking about doing a joint project on Pseudo Dionysius, which I'm sure we'll pull off eventually. I really like to do that. The Cloud of Unknowing. Yeah, all those texts are super important. I'd love to come back to those. I'll say that in many ways, I'd like to do I'd love to do an episode on Hildegard and Bruno of Clairvaux. I find those so much more compelling to do than the magic episodes. The Solomonic magic stuff I find it to be a little bit of it's just not that interesting to me. But mysticism, covering the mystical stuff, because it intersects with philosophy in, I think, really interesting ways. So So yeah, I'll come back and cover those at some point too. I know Philip and I were also talking about doing sort of a live reading in the same way that Zevi and I did a live reading of the Zohar. That Philip and I were talking about doing a live reading of some Meister Eckhart. So we might come back to that stuff as well. It's really amazing, beautiful stuff. So yep, but I will definitely come back to um, come back to that in a bit. Let's see. That was a funny one. Hold on. Where'd it go? Someone said something like, if I were to do a psyop, what kind of psyop would I do? Yeah. If you're going to do a psyop, what kind of psyop would you do? I don't know. It had to be something really, really like the people who said the birds aren't real people are the best. I would be something like that. I don't know. Like I love the things like the Middle Ages never really happened. Just crazy, insane things like that are hilarious to me. But no, I'm not smart enough to do a psyop. I don't have any capacity to do that. Making esoteric episodes hard enough. Having to do another layer of thinking, I can't do that much thinking. I'm far too stupid to do that. The hints of homosexuality in Jesus and his apostles. It seems like a pretty gay setup to me. Bunch of weird jealousy going against Mary Magdalene. I mean, I'm slow to take a concept like homosexuality, which is a really 19th century, 20th century concept, and put it onto a first century text. There's definitely, some elements of sort of homoerotic stuff. You have the naked young man and Mark and the beloved disciple. But again, even taking ideas like homoerotic and putting them on the text, I think it's not. It's anachronistic in a way that I want to avoid. But yeah, the question of sexuality is really interesting. Paul's sexuality, I think it's terribly fascinating. That is he married or not married? He seems to has very conflicted ideas about his own sexuality, and then to what degree is that also put back on Jesus? Why isn't Jesus married if he's roughly 30? There's real questions about that's unusual for not being married. What do we learn from that? I don't know what the answers to that are. I don't know that it points in the direction of what we would consider homosexuality now, but the whole issue of like sex and sexuality that haunts through the New Testament is really fascinating. But I don't have a lot more to say than that. I don't know much more about it. So that's a quick question about something like tefillin or chametz on Pesach, an esoteric concept. Even if it's mainstream in Orthodox Judaism, there aren't any sort of logical reasons to look at it. It seems to be Kabbalistic. Well, chametz is clearly that's actually just Torah. The Torah says you have to eliminate all the chametz from your environment during Pesach. So, and the Kabbalah does make a big deal about the chametz as being sort of representing Sitra Achra. Tefillin, of course, is one of the commandments. There's this entire Tamei mitzvot, right? The reasons for the commandments. There's a whole literature, including Kabbalistic literature, dedicated to that kind of the thing. And some of them seem very reasonable, like don't kill people, and some of them seem very unreasonable and very weird, like tefillin. And in fact, it's the unreasonableness of tefillin that makes the Kabbalah love tefillin. And there's all kinds of stuff about tefillin and the importance of tefillin in Kabbalah. So much so that's the reason why, if you've ever been bothered by a Lubavitcher, a Chabadnik on the street and asking if you're Jewish and if you want to put tefillin on, that's why. It's because the Kabbalah puts a huge emphasis on tefillin, and it's really it's thought to be a high mitzvah, and part of why I think what motivated that was that tefillin was not practiced much in the Middle Ages. It was a lesser practice, and some rabbis complain about that in Spain, that it just wasn't really a popular practice, and really was Kabbalah that really put a big emphasis on it, really brought it back. I love tefillin. Any excuse I can get to go daven and lay tefillin is it's a good day. I love davening shacharit. It's my favorite davening. It's in fact my only davening I like is davening shacharit, and it's always great to be able to put tefillin on. I don't know. I always feel like badass wearing tefillin. You have magical powers. All right. Let me get some more. I'm gonna be on for just a little bit longer. I'm sorry, folks. I'm not able to get all your questions. I want to make sure to get to these. Thank you, Ash Catalina. And do Paul's references to a third heaven and archons tell us anything about his relationship with Gnostics? I don't know if it tells us much about his relationship to the Gnostics. I'm not sure that Gnostics existed yet, whatever they were, but it definitely tells us something about his relationship to Hechelit mysticism. And I think he was a practitioner of Hechelit mysticism. That reference in 2 Corinthians is a dead giveaway. In fact, I'm thinking about doing a whole class on Hechelit mysticism. So if that's a thing people are interested in, let me know in the comments, because I think about this summer maybe doing just a whole class on Hechelit mysticism, because I think it deserves to get a little bit more of a day in the sun, because I think it's just terribly fascinating. But I'm not sure so much about Gnosticism, but definitely about Hechelit mysticism. I also will say that there's some overlap between Hechelit mysticism and Ascent literature, of which Gnosticism is connected to it, like the books of you. So now what connection is there, we don't know, but certainly there was Jewish bitheism that existed, and I think some variant of Jewish bitheism intersected with what we now call Gnosticism in a big way at some point. Hey, Nell, will you cover Bronze Age Northern European religion or any prehistory religions we only know from archaeology? I'm remiss to do it just because I don't know a ton about it. I mean, I will say that Andrew from Religion for Breakfast did a really great episode on Indo-European religion, and that's not quite Bronze Age. It's a little earlier. Well, that's not true. It's Bronze Age, Copper Age. Yeah, one thing I would love to cover is reconstructing how we can reconstruct something about the religion of the Indo-Europeans from the language. That to me is crazy fascinating. We can even reconstruct rituals. We can reconstruct what kinds of rituals were important to them. We can reconstruct even chunks of poetry. There's a great book about this called How to Slay a Dragon, where brilliant scholar goes through and even reconstructs entire lines of what may have been really old school Proto-Indo-European poetry. So maybe something like that. Super interesting stuff. Let me scroll back down. There's a couple more super chats coming in. Does Judaism believe Lilith exists today? Yes, absolutely. You can go buy anti-Lilith amulets in Haredi bookstores in Brooklyn all day long. Yes, there are people definitely afraid of Lilith. Mostly, of course, in Orthodox Judaism, but absolutely. Lilith is alive and well in Jewish mythology, at least Orthodox Jewish mythology. So, yep, definitely. You can buy anti-Lilith amulets. Thank you, Plastic Bubble, for the support. Yeah, so absolutely. Yeah, she's still very alive and real in that way. Ever cover ancient Ethiopian Jewish Christian mysticism? I think what I'd like to cover is maybe some of the Queen of Sheba stuff, and I think some of that's in the Kabra Nagast. So yeah, maybe do an episode on Kabra Nagast and Queen Sheba and her interesting connection to Solomon and stuff like that. So yeah, maybe some of that stuff. It's really fascinating. Ethiopians, man, thank God for them. They just saved so much stuff. What amazing scholars they were. I think that's the thing that we do not talk enough about, and we do not heap enough praise upon, is just how studious the Ethiopians were in antiquity. I mean, of course, it's still an amazing civilization, of course, but the scholarship that must have been going on in Addis Ababa and other places like that, and just absolutely is astounding. Ditto with Armenians. The Armenians also just don't get enough credit for all the cool things that they did. But yeah, I think we should be heaping a lot more praise on the Ethiopians and the Armenians, and then they get credit for. I mean, look, we even get Hermetic texts because the Armenians translated and preserved some of that stuff. No, you're right too. Also, Syrian scholarship. Yes, Syriac scholarship, man. Um, I mean, the world of like Syriac Neoplatonism and Syriac Neo-Pythagoreanism, that world is so important to so much of what we're talking about. Like that world of like that out of which Sefer Yetzirah emerged. That world is super super important. Super super important. Again, just I think it doesn't get a lot of screen time just because Syriac studies doesn't get the amount of screen time it deserves. So yeah, the Syriac people, all that stuff, super fascinating. Yeah, that stuff is crazy cool. So several people have asked me this: is the recent focus on Lilith due to the upcoming Diablo 4 release? I had no idea that that Diablo 4. One, I didn't even know there was a Diablo 4, and I had no idea that she was in it. So it's kind of a happy accident, I guess. But yeah, I had no idea that it was Diablo 4. So, but I hope she's cool in it. I mean, if the people that make the game want to have me come on and talk about the historical Lilith, I would love to do it. I'd love to do it. In Constellation Pegasus, I'm not. Constellation Pegasus says they're shocked that Lilith still puts fear of people today. I look, as a father of two kiddos, and I don't know if other parents in the room think about this, but one of the things there's a moment where you kind of just look at your kid and you just to see if they're still breathing when they're asleep in their bed. That moment where like you're waiting for them to take a breath. That's a terrifying, terrifying moment. At least it was for me. I mean, my dad once told me that he's a pretty fearless dude, and he was like, "You won't know fear until you have kids." And wasn't that the truth? That moment of waiting for them to breathe, uh, that is absolutely, that's a Lilith moment. And I can easily see why Lilith strikes fear into the heart of people today. I mean, obviously, you know, um, infant mortality isn't as much as it was back then, but it's pretty scary stuff. But yeah, you can go to most Orthodox bookstores, farm stores, and they'll probably have some Lilith amulets there. I don't think Jewish men wear them, and they're typically just a little piece of paper, basically. They're not really worn, but they're typically hung near a crib. Um, we even have Khamsa's magical, amulets, hung near our kids' crib. So it's still, even if you're not a believer in the supernatural or whatever that is, it's still pretty customary to have some anti Lilith protection in the house. But yeah, crib death is super scary. At least to me, it is. That's a great question here. Whoops. Yeah. Between Esoterica and the Modern Hermeticist, were the recent antique esoteric books sold covered topics in part by both of you to some degree? I mean, the little book that I sold, the little Hermetic Reader, which is a really cool little book, that one had a whole episode I did about it. So, in that one, which by the way, I know there were several people that wanted that book, and eventually it got sold to a support of the channel. But I have another one coming. So if you're interested in getting a copy of that Hermetic Reader, let me know, because I'm going to have another copy inbound that's going to be roughly the same price. So if you want a copy of it, please let me know soon so I can reserve it for you. But yeah, I think that all those texts, Michael Sellis on demons, I've covered that one. On sacrifice, I've covered that one. So I've covered a bunch of them. Who in the world is coming in the door? One of my children is battering down the door. Hey, Zohar. Hi. Hi. Do you want to come say hi? Yeah. You guys want to meet one of my kiddos who's managed to beat down the door? Come here. Hey. You little booger. Ugh. Everybody, this is, what's your name? Your name is Zohar. And you have a dinosaur on your shirt. So everybody, this is Zohar. You know what's you see? Who is that?
Abba.
That's Abba. Yep. But really, it's a whole bunch of people on the internet. But you know, you're not supposed to be in here, right? This is Abba's. That's Abba's room. There's all kinds of things in here that can poke you. Yeah, this is a microphone. Yep, this is a microphone.
Yeah,
Is there any? Do you have any esoteric secrets you want to share with everybody?
Yeah.
What do you want to share with them?
Saba. Tata.
Saba and Tata. Saba and Tata are downstairs, aren't they? You want to go downstairs?
No.
Okay, Abba's gonna be done in just a minute.
A bumblebee.
A bumblebee.
Yeah, a bumblebee outside.
There's a bumblebee outside. All right, let me get my child out of the room and I'll come right back, folks. You okay?
Yeah.
Okay, you gotta go downstairs. But you got to meet a lot of nice internet people, huh?
Yeah.
You know, those are people that support Abba.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's the shapes. Okay, Bubba. I will see you in a little bit. Bye-bye. All right, everybody. So that was Zohar, our 2-year-old, 2.5-year-old, which they have this thing which they call booty power, which they use their butt to basically ram a door open. So they did that. So random highlight of the stream is a random 2-year-old. So yeah, and they had to come show you the dinosaur shirt and the bumblebee. But yeah, that's Zohar. If you've ever wondered about, you know, how much I like esotericism, although I will say this, that I did not pick the name Zohar. I actually voted for the name Binah. That was my original vote for naming the child, but eventually Zohar won out, which because I thought it was too intense of a name, but also as if naming your child after a sphere is also not also a big deal. But who broke the tie was our Catholic Polish nurse, who said, looked at the child and said, "This child is strong. Zohar, strong name." There we go. Zohar it was. All right, folks. Yeah, so it's yeah, radiant. They're kind of radiant looking, aren't they? With the blonde hair. Yeah, we call Zohar Zobear. Which is I don't know why we call them Zobear. I came up with that, but it's funny. I was just speaking about Lilith and how scary Lilith was. That's why I'm so scared of her. Take my baby away. But that was Zobear. All right, folks. Well, I think I'm going to jump off the stream. Let me just say a big thank you to all of you. You know, 455 people. My goodness, in the chat. You know, Esoterica is you know, as much as, you know, the channel's been around now for a few years, but it is and it's always going to be an experiment in crowdfunded education. It's a gamble on my part that says, look, I have this education. I can provide it for free to anyone who can get access to YouTube, and it's thanks to fine folks like you that make the channel possible, through liking and commenting and buying ridiculous t-shirts, which buy some merch if you want to support the channel, Patreon supporters, people that donate, super chats, all of this stuff. You guys make this possible, and you really, you know, one of the things that I am eternally grateful for is being able to do what I love. And, you know, and a lot of people do not have that luxury. And what I love is being an educator. Providing education is what I love to do. It's a sacred vocation in my book. And the fact that I get to do it is thanks to you all. And I want to express my deep and sincerely felt gratitude for people, for all the kind of support that all of you offer. And I'm going to continue to provide the best content I can on these topics, and have my random children walk in the middle of live stream. And I just want to, again, just to express my appreciation for making all this possible. So again, if you want to support the channel, you know, buy a t-shirt, go sign up for, you know, Patreon, you can basically, it's like, I think for 1 year you can support the channel for $54. It's basically like buying me a beer every month. It's a little thing that I think, helps keep all this afloat, keep the lights on, all those things. Yeah, support the channel if you can, and yeah, thank you. Thank you for everything you do. Um, all right, folks. Well, I'm going to go hang out with my kiddos, and then I'm off to New Orleans tomorrow. By the way, if you're in New Orleans and you're around on the weekend, I'll be around doing some filming in the French Quarter, actually, with Attaché, Andy from Attaché Films, where he and I are going to be doing a collaborative project on Aleister Crowley, Absinthe, and the Old Absinthe House. So if you're interested in Aleister Crowley and esoteric stuff, you may see me walking around the French Quarter with Andy doing some filming on the weekend. So if you're around in New Orleans and you see me, you see us out, come say hi. But again, thanks, folks. I'm going to go hang out with my kids, and yeah, thank you all. Thank you all so much for making this possible. Jason, I also want to say a big thank you for you. Jason helps me to do some of the moderating in the chat, and also is just a big friend of the channel, and has his own channel that you really should subscribe to. Getting really top scholars, asking really great questions. Again, really providing a free education. Just a banger of a thing. So yeah, take a look at Jason's channel. Jason, you show your channel chat in the thing. But yeah, the Witchfinder General. But other than that, folks, I'm gonna take a break for the weekend. I'm gonna go to New Orleans and do my fair share of sinful behavior. Yeah, I would like to go to New Orleans for Halloween. I would like to do that. It's a great place for doing Halloween. So, all right, folks. Well, next week, look for an episode on Toth, and who everyone will correct my pronunciation for. And oh yeah, Genghis, I would love to do a conversation with Damien Eccles. That would be, if anyone knows him or can put us into contact, please do that. If anyone maybe is a Patreon supporter of Damien Eccles, put us in contact. I would love to be in contact with him for lots of reasons. But yeah, if you're in New Orleans this weekend, we may be out in the Quarter, so come say hi, and all that. But until then, see folks next week. And episode on Melchizedek. Yes, I will eventually do an episode on the Righteous King Melchizedek. I will do one. So yeah, like I said, if folks know Damien, put us in touch. I'd love to be in touch with him. All right, folks, again, thank you. I appreciate it, and see you soon for the live stream, and also for episodes on Toth and all kinds of new stuff coming. So see you folks soon. You guys have a great afternoon, great evening, great weekend.